There we go.
Loading a preview.
Hey everyone, and welcome to our Friday afternoon live stream. Sorry for being a little bit delayed. We have had some Mevo issues here. I'm going to go ahead and pass that off to my editor. Hopefully this is all going to be working for you. YouTube is telling us that there may be some buffering delaying today, so hopefully nobody is experiencing that, but we will see if anybody has a problem. So let's get right to the questions here. The first thing that we saw in the list was about adaptive suspension systems, and let's just dive right on into that. So some folks were asking about how the adaptive suspension system worked on the GTI and the GLI and whether or not it was worth getting the adaptive suspension. So there are several different kinds of adaptive suspensions that you can get. There are hydraulic and air ride systems that even though one's using a fluid and one's using air, basically function the same way. The adaptive suspension system is controlling both the damping motion and the spring motion in the system. Suspensions have two main components there. There's the spring, which is holding the vehicle up at a particular ride height, and then there's the damping that controls how the action of the strut or the strut or the suspension component is moving there. So the important thing to remember is that a lot of the adaptive suspension systems that you see out there, especially on less expensive vehicles like the Volkswagen GTI, inexpensive luxury vehicles, for instance, the G70, a lot of the BMW models, Audi models, etc., that offer adaptive suspension systems in vehicles under about $80,000 or so. They generally have systems that can only control the damping. They don't do anything to the spring rate. So it's very similar to what we see in the GTI. So in vehicles like this, the big thing to remember is that they're never going to be able to give you a softer spring or a firmer spring. So what manufacturers try to do is they give you a spring that's as soft as they think they can use to give you the performance characteristics you want, and then everything else is controlled just by damping, trying to limit the motion of that shock or the strut in the vehicle. And that can have some unintended consequences. For instance, Volvo's first attempt at this back in 2000 or so, when they brought out their R series, the S60R and the V70R, they had some very funny suspension motions in some of the suspension modes because the springs were a little bit too soft in some ways. So even though you could firm things up by not allowing the damper to move much in either direction by closing off those valves, you could end up with sort of a bouncing feeling in the suspension. We also see that to some degree in the new Veloster N. Now that said, I would rather have an adaptive suspension than not, so I think that it's still a good trade-off, and they're getting better at doing this. So if you're debating about whether to get it or not in your inexpensive performance vehicle, I would definitely select that option. So let's move along to our chat questions here. Any thoughts on the reliability of Nissan CVTs? That is an interesting question, T. I get that an awful lot. And the long answer is that I think you need to take a look at reliability metrics of the vehicles on a holistic level, and that we don't really know the true picture of reliability of anything that's sold today. That's the important thing to remember. We can only go by predictions. We can predict based on how vehicles that manufacturer has built in the past do. And here is where Nissan has had some stumbles in the past with CVT reliability. But again, we don't know whether that applies to their newer designs and their newer vehicles or not. There are plenty of Nissan shoppers out there that say they've got 100, 200,000 miles in their vehicle with a CVT and they've never had a problem. And then there are the hordes of online folks that say, my Nissan CVT blew up before 60,000 miles. Which one is indicative of the population as a whole? We can't say for sure, but we can say that in long-term dependability metrics, Nissan generally scores above average. And we can say that when you look at their reliability metrics in greater detail, transmission problems are a relatively common problem with Nissans. Now, does that mean that their transmissions die before transmissions from other manufacturers? Not necessarily. But if you look at Nissan's overall reliability picture, where their trouble points are in the transmission department. But again, still above average reliability, generally speaking. So that's That's how I think we should look at it there. Let's move on here. Naveen's asking, what are our thoughts on Mazda going inline-six rear-wheel drive and turning into a luxury brand? Main thought there is I'll believe it when I see it. Mazda's a very small company, so they don't have a lot of money to spend on projects that aren't necessarily going to sell well. They do need, however, to make more profitable products. That's obviously an important thing for the brand. That's why you see them definitely pushing on more premium features in their mainstream cars, because those are going to be very profitable. The vehicle itself, the design's been paid for. Adding those premium features isn't going to cost much money. But making a separate rear-wheel drive luxury car, I would say that's less likely. We keep hearing rumors about that, but Mazda seems to be full of rumors and less full of product that turns into reality in a way. So hopefully we'll see something in the next few years, but I don't know if we know anything right now. Can we review the Dodge Journey? I have actually asked about the Dodge Journey, Dan, and I've been told that it's unlikely to be in the fleet because it's so old. It's still a great deal if you're looking for absolutely inexpensive transportation. But there are a lot of other crossovers out there that are frankly better than the Journey, and I think that's the big reason that FCA is not putting it into the fleet for review. They know that it's just not going to do very well in competitive comparisons. A common complaint in the sort of the fan base that watches reviews and views videos all the time has been that every automotive outlet out there seems to give every car at least a passing grade. There's a reason for that. The reason is that we're generally testing brand new cars. So if I'm testing all the cars that we've had this week, with the exception of the Nissan Rogue, have been released in the last 2 to 3 years or significantly refreshed in the last 2 to 3 years. And even the Rogue has had some pretty major changes in 2017 and 2018. And the reality is that if you're going to be designing a brand new product for sale in the market, why would you design the product to be class middling or class trailing? You wouldn't. You would try and design a car or an SUV or a truck or whatever to be class topping. You would design it to beat everybody in some way or another. So we see the new RAV4, for instance, and they've gone all in on off-road ability. They've also decided to give us a torque vectoring rear axle in the limited trim. They've given us a hybrid with 40 miles per gallon. Ford then said, hold my beer, and they're giving us a plug-in hybrid and a hybrid with a mechanical all-wheel drive system and a standard turbocharged engine. And so in that process, it's almost a sure bet that the oldest product in the segment is going to be the least desirable and the least competitive, and the newest product in the segment is going to be the most desirable and the most competitive. It just seems to be the way that it works. And I would say that a select few products end up being good values and just good overall vehicles in the long term. Otherwise, they tend to fall back towards the bottom of the stack. And those are predictably the ones that seem to sell the best. The Honda CR-V, the RAV4, the Nissan Rogue. The Rogue is ancient at this point. It was first launched back in 2014. But you get in the Rogue, and it's still a very comfortable place to be. There's still rational reasons to buy it. It doesn't look dated necessarily, even though it is old. It looks like something that Nissan could have created this last year. There are areas where it falls behind the competition, but overall it's a good value. And there are reasons to buy one. That's why Nissan sells over 400,000 of them a year. But then on the flip side, we take a look at vehicles like the Hyundai Tucson, which seemed really cool when it came out. It was focusing on handling, on practicality, the long warranty, etc. But now, as it's gotten a little bit older, it definitely feels a little bit cheaper than the RAV4 on the inside. The dual-clutch transmission that I still really like was not a huge hit with a lot of the customer base, and its sales, I think, have shown that. So I think that's the reality that we have to keep in mind when you're looking at reviews especially. So if you're out there looking at a new car and you're reading reviews here and there, make sure you're looking at reviews that are relatively recent. We don't go back and try and create new reviews on old cars generally. Occasionally they will come through the door, and then we end up with videos like the Toyota Sienna, which I don't think scores very well in its minivan category because it's just not new enough anymore. So keep that in mind when you're looking at those vehicle reviews, the age of the review itself. Let's see here. Is a 2014 Mazda 3 sedan a reliable car? Does it have a reliable transmission? The Mazda 3 has proved relatively average in terms of overall reliability, depending on the metric you look at it. The transmission has not been a problem point in that series of Mazda. It doesn't have the most modern transmission, but it has been pretty reliable overall. Let's see. Biren is asking, I'm in the market for a new small SUV, looking for a hybrid version. What's your best suggestion? You don't have a whole lot of options right now, to be honest. You're going to be looking at the RAV4 hybrid, the Nissan Rogue hybrid, and the upcoming Ford Escape hybrid, but you're going to have to wait till the end of this calendar year for the Escape hybrid, most likely. At the moment, my top pick would easily be the RAV4 hybrid, which we have this week. And that was another one of our topics that we wanted to talk about in advance here. We do have the RAV4 XSE hybrid in for review right now. We'll also be comparing that to the other bestseller in the segment, the Nissan Rogue. Those two vehicles tend to swap places month after month as to which one is the best-selling crossover in America. The RAV4 hybrid is an excellent hybrid. We have been averaging 40 miles per gallon or so in mixed driving. They've made some serious improvements to the all-wheel drive system in it. One thing that I've complained about in the past with Toyota's all-wheel drive systems is that they weren't capable of sending too much power to the rear axle. And while that is still true, the RAV4 will never send more than 50 horsepower or about 90 or so pound-feet of torque to the rear axle. It will do that under a broader set of situations than the previous generation RAV4. They've reprogrammed the all-wheel drive system to have a trail mode, is what they're calling it. I think they could have named that a little better. Maybe they could have called that an all-wheel drive lock or something like that. Either way, the system is designed to try and send more power to the rear axle, and it is very noticeable when you get it out on rougher roads, especially steep gradients that are slippery. You'll really notice the difference, new RAV4 versus last RAV4. But it's still not going to be as capable as a mechanical all-wheel drive system. Do keep that in mind. So let's see here, moving along. What are our thoughts on fleet sales? Just missed that comment there. What are our thoughts on fleet sales? Why do they hurt resale value? Blah, blah, blah. So fleet sales, this is a common complaint in some corners. Honda's the first one to bandy this around, saying, I know the RAV4, the Rogue and RAV4 outsell us, but it's all fleet sales. Fleet sales are the reason. The reality is fleets need cars, and if the fleets didn't have manufacturers out there selling them vehicles there, they would be getting them somewhere else. So fleet sales are not necessarily the evil that they're made out to be. But the reason that they can depress resale value is that when you sell a car at a fleet discount, so say you're buying a Ford or a Chevy van, that manufacturer could give the fleet buyer several $1,000s off depending on the volume of cars or vans or SUVs that they're buying. And then when that company or that rental car agency or whatever then sells the car on the used car market, its value obviously has gone down because its value started lower to begin with. So that's really the reason that resale values end up lower. I don't find fleet sales to be particularly vexing, though. It really depends on the model. Again, fleets are going to have to buy cars somewhere. General Motors has been trying an interesting take on this lately, where they take an old model of the car. So the Chevy Impala, for instance, was a good example of this. They take the old model, they keep selling it as a fleet-only vehicle, and the purpose of that is to try and help improve resale value of their consumer cars. But those cars are still going to end up out on the market sometime, and you would logically assume that would affect overall brand resale value, and they're still going to be sold at some point, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a tricky question. Let's see here. Let's move on. Brad, have we heard anything about the next generation Sienna? Not anything concrete, and we probably won't hear anything until at least the end of the year. The next generation Sienna is at least a full calendar year away. Otherwise, we would have already seen it. So, for instance, the auto show circuit, November is really the earliest auto show of the production car year. And then from there, we move on to Chicago, New York, etc. And New York being the last one in April, typically. And if it's not shown in April, manufacturers generally won't show a new car until November. And we would already be seeing the rumor mill circulating about that. So if you aren't really seeing any reliable rumors on a new Sienna, then don't expect it to debut until probably the next auto show cycle actually in 2020, for instance. Let's see, Kendall is saying, I'm ready to go talk to my parents about getting my first car. Any suggestions? 5-seat crossover or a full-size car? You'd probably get the best deal at the moment on a full-size car because car sales definitely seem to be a little bit down. 5-seat crossovers, I would definitely look for something that has the latest in active safety technology standards, so something like a RAV4 or a CRV. They're going to be your best options as far as overall safety and active driver assistance systems. So I would probably stay in something in that category. If you're going to keep the car for a while, I would also suggest really focusing on fuel economy. This is something that a lot of first-time shoppers don't necessarily think about. But if you're ready to go to school or you're just starting out in life and you're getting your first car, cost of operation is going to be a big factor for you. So the less expensive the car is to keep around long term, the longer you'll likely keep it and the less expensive it will be for you. So the less of your monthly budget will be going into a car. So look at the whole picture, look at insurance rates for your demographic, look at the cost of operation. You might really want to look at a modern hybrid, for instance. So if you're looking at a RAV4, see if you can step up to the RAV4 hybrid because it will save you money in the long term in that car. Let's see, moving along here. Top compact size hybrid SUV in the market right now. Can you please help with that? Again, I think that would be the RAV4 hybrid. Let's see. Do you agree with many American commenters that Volkswagen and Audi are unreliable? Well, the numbers definitely back up that Volkswagen's reliability is not where the Japanese are. So again, it depends on your particular view of unreliability. When you look at Volkswagen's numbers, they definitely have more electronics issues than a Honda or a Toyota or a Kia or a Hyundai. And depending on the metric you look at, they may even be lower than some of the American brands out there. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, Audi is kind of a different animal because Audi, their reliability seems very similar to other European companies, and European companies, generally speaking, fall below average in terms of overall reliability. So if you want a reliable car, you buy Asian first, and that would be either Hyundai, Kia, or Honda, or Toyota. And then you would buy some of the secondary Asian brands. So Mazda's not as reliable as Honda or Toyota, generally speaking. Neither is Mitsubishi, etc. And then the American brands tend to fall somewhere in the middle. And then the European brands and some of the other American brands fall down towards the bottom. Luxury car companies tend to do worse in some reliability metrics simply because of the sheer number of gadgets and gizmos there are on the cars. And newer and fancier gadgets land first in luxury cars. So if you're looking at a car, for instance, with adaptive cruise control, the first cars that had adaptive cruise control were luxury cars, and some of those systems were a little bit buggy. The first cars out there with autonomous braking systems, with massaging seats, power windows, things that we take for granted these days, those features started out in luxury cars first because those are the shoppers that can afford to pay for that new technology. Unfortunately, those are not proven technologies when they're brand new, and so those tend to inspire unreliability, for lack of a better word. So when you're looking at the latest in performance engines, performance transmissions, the latest in luxury features or driver assistance features, you'll find those on luxury cars. Generally, they're going to be less reliable. That will drag down their reliability metrics. Now, on the flip side, if you get one of those luxury cars without those fancier doodads, they're probably going to be above average in terms of overall reliability. So, for instance, even though BMW's reliability metrics, depending on the model, will sometimes be below average, if you bought a base BMW 330i with very few features on it, just the basic vehicle, power seats, power windows, and infotainment system, and that's it, it's probably going to be fairly reliable. So hopefully that answers your question there. When can we expect a full review on the 2020 Kia Soul? We will have a review on the regular gasoline engine for that, the non-turbo model, next week. So be sure and stay tuned. The video is completed. Our members are able to watch that video at the moment, and hopefully that will be out for the rest of you all next week. Some of our videos get slotted in strangely depending on exactly what's going on. For instance, next week we're getting some videos on our new long-term tester. So this allows me to segue into two things before I forget. The first is that we now have paid memberships available here at Alex and Autos. I apologize to anybody that's offended by that sort of thing, but the reality is that revenues are down on YouTube for pretty much everybody. And so one of the ways that we can attempt to make up for that is by offering memberships. So you can give your hard-earned cash here to see our videos in advance. We'll send you some stickers. There are going to be some other benefits to paid memberships coming in the future. And the real goal of that is just for folks that want to support the Alex Nautos channel. There's a way for you guys to do that. Nothing is going to change on the public side, so all of our videos will still be the same. There may be a few extra live shows done for the paid memberships, but on the whole, we'll still have the weekly live show here on the main channel. We'll still be doing our usual reviews and videos and that sort of thing there. You can click the join button, or click on some of the links if you're on one of the devices that doesn't support that. If a lot of you didn't know this, one of the reasons that revenue tends to be down across the YouTube scene is commercials. A lot of people are using commercial blockers, ad blockers, and the rise of YouTube Red is a little bit unfortunate from our end. Alex Nautos makes no money with sponsorships or any other deals. I know there's been some rampant rumor going on there in the Tesla Model 3 videos that somehow we're paid shills and we're on someone's payroll, and combustion engine manufacturers are paying us to say that electric vehicles are terrible, which I thought was hilarious because I really liked the Model 3. At any rate, that's absolutely not true. All of our money is made either by people that donate on Patreon, members that pay for paid memberships monthly, or the Google ads that you all watch during these videos, during our regular published videos, etc. At the moment, we have never done any sponsorships, so we haven't done any, this video is sponsored by Shell, or whatever is in this glass, or LaCroix, or something like that. We haven't done any of that here, and hopefully we won't be doing that. Who knows what the future holds for us. But if you're watching this on YouTube Red and you're not watching those commercials, then we're making basically nothing off of your views. So that's my thought on the YouTube Red thing. At any rate, I have now digressed. So you'll be able to watch those videos early if you're a member, and sometime next week if you're not. But that drives me on to why the video might be delayed, which is that we're getting a new car here at Alex Nautos. So the Kia Soul EV's lease is up. It has been 3 years since we got that. We will have a wrap-up video sometime this month on that, where we're going to talk about everything that happened over 3 years. That video is probably going to be pretty boring because nothing has happened over 3 years. Not even a bulb has burnt out. At any rate, so we're going to have that wrap-up video there, and then it's going to be replaced by a hydrogen fuel cell car this month. Actually, Saturday morning, we fly out to go buy it and drive it home. You might think I'm crazy because we can buy a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle in San Jose as well. But the reason I wanted to do that is because I wanted to take a road trip in it and see how that really works in a hydrogen vehicle, what the hydrogen network is, what it's like to do a long-term road trip in a hydrogen fuel cell car. So that's coming up very soon. And why a hydrogen car and not another electric car? I was really torn on that. I initially started our process here thinking about electric cars. And honestly, if the Model 3 had been a Model Y and was a crossover, not a sedan, we would have gone with the Model Y and just kept it. But it's not. It's a sedan, and its cargo area, even though it's big for a car, is not SUV crossover sized. And we do see that in some of those other vehicles out there. So that's the main reason that we did that. And then why not an electric crossover? We had an electric car, and I thought it was time to try something new. So I've done diesel, I've done hybrids, I've done plug-in hybrids, we've done EVs, but we've never owned a hydrogen car. So who knows? It'll be an interesting experiment, and in 3 years we will probably get something else. Anyway, moving along, let's see here. So I wait for the diesel Jeep JL or just get the gasoline one. Found in Asia, they may not have low sulfur diesel. So that would really depend, I would say, on the cost of diesel versus gasoline in your area and how much that diesel engine premium is. The reality is that in America, it doesn't make sense to buy a diesel. The extra cost for most of the diesel engines out there versus what you'll save, quote unquote, save in fuel economy, just not worth it. The exceptions there would be big trucks. So if you're looking at a 3/4 ton or a 1/2 ton truck, the prime reason to buy a diesel is not fuel economy. Instead, it's towing ability or hauling ability, and that's why you would want to get those. But in the mainstream segment, this theoretical, mythical diesel that will save you thousands of dollars over the lifetime of your vehicle, it just doesn't seem to pan out that way. If diesel engines were cheaper, then it would, but unfortunately, the extra cost of the diesel engine is the biggest problem in that equation. So moving along here, what is the nearest to the Toyota RAV4 hybrid? Oops. In case you didn't know, the way that YouTube does live stream comments is really awkward. When you try and click on one, it just zips to the most recent comment. So sorry about that. Someone was asking about RAV4 hybrids and if there were any alternatives, I believe. The alternatives right now, there aren't very many. So wait till the Ford Escape hybrid comes out if you want alternatives. Let's see. What do we think about Volkswagen Atlas long-term reliability? Generally speaking, the Atlas is going to be less reliable long-term than some of the other alternatives, but if you're looking for a family-friendly SUV or crossover, the Atlas is about as family-friendly as they come. And I would say that if you're especially looking for a car for your family that has child seats, especially forward-facing child seats, I think that the long-term reliability qualms with the Atlas are worth just getting one, and then 3 or 4 years later, get something else once your kids are out of child seats. That's going to really be the big deal there, because it's going to be so much easier to deal with kids in child seats. Naveen's asking if we could review the Mitsubishi Mirage. That's unlikely because it's not new, so we probably won't get it until it's new. What's the latest on the reestablishment of a Genesis dealer network? I live in Houston, see very few Genesis cars and no advertising of significance. It's a long, drawn-out process with Genesis. If you didn't know, I'll refresh everybody's memory about what happened with Genesis and Hyundai. In a nutshell, Hyundai decided that Genesis should be separate. This should be a Lexus-like thing. So Toyota, Lexus, Hyundai, Genesis. That's what they wanted. Only Hyundai was trying to do this in a world where Genesis products already existed. The Genesis sedan itself, what became the G80, and the Equus, which was what became the G90, they already existed, and they were already sold at Hyundai dealers. Hyundai realized that this wasn't sustainable. They needed a separate dealer network for a luxury brand, because that's what luxury car shoppers expected. And they also needed to reduce the size of the dealer network. There are over 1,200 Toyota dealers in the U.S. There are over 1,000 Hyundai dealers in the U.S., but only about 200 Lexus dealers. So for luxury car companies, because the volume is so much smaller, you can't really have a dealer network that big, because a dealer can't make money, can't survive on selling one car a month. So in the Bay Area, you'll notice there are tons of Toyota dealers, but very few Lexus dealers for that reason. You need to reduce your network commensurate to the volume of product that you're going to sell. So Hyundai tried to do this. They tried to say only our preferred dealers will be able to sell Hyundais, or Hyundai sell Hyundai Genesis products, and dealers sued, and unfortunately some dealers in Georgia won. So Hyundai's solution to this was, well, that's fine, we'll just change everything. So they created a completely separate company, Genesis Motors America. Instead of trying to roll it into the Hyundai brand, they set everything up 100% separate. And that costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. It takes new franchise dealership agreements to be rewritten and published, and all that goes into that in every state, because every state's franchise rules are different. And then on top of that, they had some further lawsuits in some additional states. For instance, Texas, there were some lawsuits going around where additional dealers were saying that Hyundai couldn't sign these new franchise agreements without somehow getting the signatures of the old dealer, and lots went into that. Long story short, there are still states where Genesis vehicles cannot be sold because there is no established dealer network. And at this point in time, it looks like it's still going to be months, not days, until that is firmly completed. Now, if you were to buy a Genesis in one of those in another state and then take it back to that state, you likely would be able to get the vehicle serviced at an existing Hyundai store or Genesis store. Former Genesis store, I should say. Details are a little sketchy on that, however, though. But that's the big reason that Genesis has not been advertising much, because the number of states and the number of locations where you can buy one is a little bit limited right now. So moving along here, why is the Lexus trackpad bad? The Lexus trackpad, I dislike it because it takes more time with your eyes off the road. It's not it's like using a mouse, and using a mouse to like move this little cursor around on the screen just takes more time than looking at it and stabbing at it. I think that's the real reason that the new Lexus RX, for instance, now has a touchscreen infotainment system. I think Lexus finally gave up, And even though it does have the trackpad still, you can actually touch the screen once again. And I think that's the right direction for Lexus if they're not going to redesign their software. I think the big reason that we don't see the same issue in Audi, Mercedes, BMW, all that kind of thing, is that they redesigned their software to use the new input method. Lexus did not. So what Lexus did was they took the exact same software and they took away the touchscreen and they gave you a mousy thing to interact with the screen. And that's, I think, the origin of the distraction factor with that software. And every other manufacturer that has some sort of funky alternative input method without a touchscreen, they've designed their software to work with that controller. Now, do I still think that touchscreens are the way to go? Personally, I like touchscreens better, but if you have to do it, at least you should redesign your software to make the little control widget work better. That's my thought there. Do we think that Maxima is a large car? If so, do you think it's even a four-door sports car? I think that ship has sailed for Nissan. It's an Avalon competitor, and the delta between midsize and full-size sedan has shrunk. So no, the Nissan Maxima really isn't a large car any more than the Altima or Corolla, or Camry or Accord is. And there are some midsize sedans that are definitely roomier on the inside than the Maxima. The main reason that we don't see a true full-size sedan in America outside the luxury segment anymore simply is the corporate average fuel economy standards in America. It disincentivizes big sedans. So I think that's why we see vehicles like that. Instead, theoretically, the Maxima is supposed to be the more premium alternative. So if you want more premium features, you move up into the into the Maxima, into the Avalon, into the Cadenza, into the Volkswagen Arteon. You move up from their mid-size sedan into those for that reason, but not because you want more room on the inside, since they won't really give you more room. Let's see. Do we think Nissan will divorce from Renault in the next 1 to 2 years? It's hard to tell. I mean, the lines, it's not really a marriage, so it's a lot easier to end that relationship or curtail it when it's not as deep or as complicated as a merger or a more firm arrangement. So it is looking that like Nissan and Renault are moving apart from one another. They've still got a lot in common with one another and a lot of interests that are commingled. But since they never became one company, I think it's going to be easier for that separation to happen. Let's see here. Oscar's asking for a better budget buy, either Clarity or Model 3. That really depends on your personal situation. I would say, generally speaking, the Clarity is probably going to be the better budget vehicle, depending on exactly which one you're looking at. The Clarity is going to be less expensive. It's still going to get its $7,500 tax credit, and that's the big thing that's going to affect the Model 3 in terms of the value equation. Now, without question, the Model 3 is by far the more fun option. So if you're looking for a fun budget thing, Model 3, absolutely positively. If you're talking about battery only on the Clarity, definitely the Model 3 again, because the battery electric Clarity, the range is really, really small. Not a fan of that particular model. Now, I really like the Clarity plug-in hybrid. It's comfortable, it's safe, it's well featured, it's well priced, and it has a big back seat. So it's really hard to go wrong with the plug-in Clarity. On the hydrogen side, I think it's better than the Mirai, but I think the Hyundai Nexo outclasses the Clarity in a lot of ways when it comes to the hydrogen vehicle. It just ends up being more practical. So it would depend on what you're looking for and when you're going to buy it, because the Model 3's federal tax credit cuts in half again to under $2,000 starting in 30 days from now. So keep that in mind. Let's see here. Honda Accord or Arteon? I am torn on that one. I would probably get the Accord. I haven't driven the Arteon yet, though, so keep that in mind. We don't have a full review on that or even a first drive yet. But the main reason is that the Accord is such a good value. And from what we've seen of the Arteon, it's not really roomier or any sportier than the Accord. So I think that's a tough sell, especially if you're looking at the top-end model of the Accord with the 2-liter turbo, etc. Let's see here. What do we think about the refreshed 2020 Lexus RX? I'm intrigued by the fact that it's moved back to a touchscreen, which I think is a good way to go for Lexus. But then again, but on the other side, I'm a little sad that they didn't take the time to update some of the other systems in the vehicle. So it's still going to be outclassed in terms of power and handling by the Lincoln Nautilus, for instance. And in terms of overall value, I think that the Lincoln Nautilus is still a better buy overall than the Lexus RX. Now, the RX is unquestionably going to be the more reliable vehicle, so if that's what you're into, that's definitely still going to be a good option. We will definitely be reviewing the new Subaru Legacy one. Stay tuned for that. We don't know exactly when. We've just been told sometime this summer, and we haven't been told yet by Subaru whether the Outback or the Legacy will be going first. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the Outback, because the Outback outsells the Legacy by a pretty healthy margin, so that's probably how they're going to do that. Let's see here. Someone's asking about Mitsubishi and Subaru, but I don't know what exactly he's asking about, so hopefully we'll get a follow-up on that one. Jonathan's been saying there's rumors of a hybrid powertrain in the next generation Tacoma. Do you have any reason to believe that this would be announced? There have been a lot of rumors, but I don't know if any of them are founded in reality. If you go back in time, there have been rumors about a Toyota hybrid truck and a Toyota hydrogen truck for a long, long time, and none of them have really come to fruition. I think the big reason for that is that Toyota would have to develop a new hybrid system for their trucks. The planetary power split hybrid system that they use in the Highlander, in the RAV4, in the Camry hybrid, etc., it's not well suited to towing or hauling. And as a result, a new hybrid system would have to be designed by Toyota, and that hybrid system would likely have to be more similar to what we see in the Ford F-150 hybrid that's likely coming up soon. That's still a little bit of a rumor, but a little bit firmer than Toyota's hybrid. And the Explorer and the Navigator, the Explorer and the Aviator. That hybrid system has a traditional automatic transmission and then a pancake motor. It's very similar to what we see in a lot of European hybrid systems. Those hybrid systems tend not to be as efficient as what Toyota uses in the Prius, the Camry, RAV4, etc., but they have the advantage of handling those higher torque loads. So they're better for towing, better for hauling, that sort of thing. So until Toyota develops that kind of hybrid system, I don't think we'll be seeing a hybrid pickup truck anytime soon. The other thing to keep in mind is that the hybrid system in the Lexus LC and the Lexus LS, even though it is a rear-wheel drive hybrid system, it still does not have an overall design that is engineered for towing and hauling at this moment. Maybe it could be adapted to do that, but at the moment, that's not quite what we see. Someone's asking here, how does Dodge get away, that's the phrase they use, right? Get away with a whole line of poor fuel economy vehicles. The real reason for that is that they sell well. The other thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about Ram and their trucks, the Ram truck line actually gets good fuel economy. Separating things out a little further, 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks don't matter at all for fuel economy standards. They're not rated. Manufacturers aren't obliged to meet any fuel economy standards, etc. Doesn't matter at all. When it comes to 1500 series trucks, the half-ton series, Ram's trucks get very good fuel economy, much better fuel economy than the Titan or Tundra. And as far as fuel economy standards go, they're right on schedule for compliance as far as future standards go. And that's why we see the mild hybrid systems available in the V8 and standard in the V6. Now, when it comes to Dodge specifically, remember that Dodge does not sell in huge volumes. So their vehicles that they sell under that portfolio are balanced out by either paying the fines, and they're high profit vehicles, so those 1,000 horsepower cars, 800 horsepower cars, they're balanced out by either paying the fines, that's why you're paying $80,000 for a Dodge Challenger, or in Europe, they buy the credits from Tesla. So in California and in the European Union, there's an agreement between FCA and Tesla to share their credit pool, and that's how they stay in business. We see this from a wide variety of manufacturers. FCA is not the only manufacturer to buy credits on the open credit system, and they're also not the only manufacturer to balance out poor fuel economy vehicles with alternatives. That's why FCA sells Fiats in the US. That's why they have the Fiat 500e. That's why they have the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid, for instance. And that's why Toyota sells so many hybrid cars. So that's how that system works. Jags is saying, my dad's car stalls for some reason, but the check engine light doesn't turn on. Any idea why this could be? The important thing to remember, Jags, about check engine lights is that they generally have nothing to do with the engine per se. I've always thought it was a really dumb name for a light. The check engine light generally deals just with emissions systems. So catalytic converter performance, misfires, which is generally considered to be an emissions thing, and the gas cap and evaporation system. So most vehicles have an evaporative emissions recovery system. The gas tank is sealed, and when things expand and contract in the gas tank, the vapors go to a catch canister, which will hold the vapors until they can be burnt by the engine. They'll get sucked back into the engine that way. So if your gas cap is loose, the engine light will turn on. If your oxygen sensor before or after your catalytic converter goes bad, check engine light will go on. If your catalytic converter goes bad and the performance drops, check engine light will turn on. If your engine misfires, generally speaking, depending on the engine, your check engine light will turn on. And that's because you're risking catalyst damage. That's why it's an emissions-related thing. So if you're blowing unburnt fuel out of the exhaust, then your catalytic converter can die prematurely. So the not starting, the sputtering, whatever, as long as the emissions part is working fine, check engine light won't come on. So moving along here, how about a Ford Fusion Hybrid titanium front-wheel drive? Not quite sure what this question is in reference to, but the Fusion Hybrid has been an excellent hybrid as far as reliability goes, but it's definitely been outclassed by some of the more modern vehicles when it comes to fuel economy and roominess inside the cabin. So if you're looking at Fusion Hybrid versus, say, Camry or Accord Hybrid, Camry and Accord are going to give you better fuel economy and a roomier interior. The Fusion also has, although I think it's aged well, it does have the oldest interior in this segment. But it's still very pretty on the outside. So I've always liked the way the Fusion looks. Same goes for the Mazda 6. Two very attractive cars, but they're definitely showing their age all the way around. Raja is asking, which is better, a CVT or an 8-speed automatic? Better is a tricky term. The CVT is going to give you better fuel economy. 8-speed automatic transmission is going to give you a sportier feel. Generally speaking, also a longer lifetime. Let's see here. Why is there a toilet float on the wall? This isn't a toilet float. This is actually a water tank fill float. So I live out in the country, and we have to have cisterns for our water for fire protection. So we keep 5,000 gallons at least around. We're upgrading to a 20,000 gallon tank sometime this summer, as long as it stops raining here and we can get the tractor in. And so that float will be used to balance the tank level out. So that's why that's there.
Someone asked about your hat.
Let's see here. 2020 Escape Impressions. I'm excited for the plug-in version. I'm also interested in the new 2020 Escape. Hopefully we'll be able to drive it. Keep those fingers crossed, everybody. We will be driving the new Ford Explorer here coming very soon, so there is hope that Ford will invite us to the Escape event. The plug-in hybrid seems really interesting to me because they've packaged the battery completely under the body, so it won't affect rear seat headroom, and it won't affect cargo room by all appearances. Now, unfortunately, it is going to delete the mechanical all-wheel drive system, and that's a really handy feature of the new Escape Hybrid, is that it has a true mechanical all-wheel drive system. So if you're looking for the most snow-capable, the most ice-capable, the best, traction vehicle in that compact crossover segment that's also a hybrid, it's probably going to be the Ford Escape Hybrid. We don't see the same sort of mechanical axle in the RAV4 hybrid, for instance. But because of the overall design of the hybrid system, it's likely going to give us better fuel economy than what we see in the Rogue hybrid. So I'm really excited about that one. Juan is asking more news of the 2020 Legacy. Again, we don't really have any news on that one yet. Someone's upgrading from a 2010 Sienna to a 2019 Sienna, or should I wait till 2020? Jags, I would say if your dad is looking at a new 2019 Sienna, he should probably take a look at the 2019 Odyssey or Pacifica Hybrid instead. I have to say the Sienna is my least favorite minivan in America right now. A lot of reasons for that. It's getting old. A common complaint about the Sienna is that later in life they start to squeak. The Sienna, although it does have all-wheel drive available, it doesn't really have the same level of modern feature functionality and gadgets that we find in any of the other competition. And the Pacifica Hybrid is quite simply going to be much less expensive to keep around. 50% better fuel economy, and the plug-in ability yields a yearly fuel savings of between $1,000 and $2,500 a year, depending on how far you drive it and how often you plug it in. The more you drive it and the more you plug in, the more you're going to save versus the Sienna. So it's hard to go wrong there. And even if the Pacifica Hybrid was less reliable overall, which it may very well be versus the Sienna, over 10 years, you're going to be saving upwards possibly of $20,000 in terms of overall fuel consumption. That's a huge number, and you could do an awful lot of repairs in that window. Chrysler offers a pretty long warranty on that vehicle, so I wouldn't really be too concerned about it. The only concern there would be, how do you feel about having your vehicle sit at a dealer for a few days while it's getting repaired? Will they provide you with a loaner vehicle? Will they not? That sort of thing. But just on the cost of operation, I would look at that hybrid at the moment. Let's see. Joe's asking, have we heard anything about bringing a hybrid CHR to the American market? No, we haven't heard anything, for the main reason that it's pretty slow. So if you look at the international hybrid CHR, it's not a speedy thing. So I don't see that coming anytime soon. What do you think of the dealership model of selling cars? Will it die soon? Blah, blah, blah. Or will dealerships hang on? Well, Valley, I think that dealerships are going to hang on primarily because of the way that laws work around the United States. So if you take a look at Tesla's attempt at circumventing the dealership laws in America, it hasn't really worked. There are over half of the states in the U.S. you cannot buy a Tesla theoretically directly from a Tesla store. It's just not allowed. Tesla gets away with that in a wide variety of different ways, with delivering you cars, having transactions done in other states, etc. But it's not a business model that I think will work for the average car shopper. If you're the 400,000 people a year that buy a Toyota RAV4, that's double all of Tesla's best aspirations in sales. You can get your car serviced in every state. And if you live in Michigan, or some of the other states in the Midwest, for instance, you cannot get your Tesla serviced in Michigan. Tesla may be able to send a service vehicle out to you, and they may be able to do some very minor things. But if anything major goes wrong with your Tesla, they have to put it on a flatbed, tow it to Ohio or Illinois, service it there, and then ship it back to you. It's kind of a pain. But a pain that is much more acceptable to the average luxury car shopper, because they'll give you a loaner car. That just doesn't happen in the RAV4 segment. So outside the luxury segment, loaner cars don't exist in general terms. So that's a lot more of a problem for mainstream cars. And there doesn't really seem to be any legislative push around the United States to change that at all. Either from car manufacturers, the average car manufacturer, or obviously the dealer network, or even the public in any real sense. So until there's more pressure on that from the public, we're not going to see much of a change. And you won't really see pressure from the car manufacturers on that, for the simple reason that their dealer network would revolt. And that would be a big problem for them. Let's see here. Do you see the new rendering of the G80? Looks hideous. I did see the new rendering, but it's just a rendering, so we don't know whether that's going to be reality or not. Some of those renderings have been close. Some of them have been way off. So I will wait to reserve judgment until we actually see the product. Do we think Toyota will ever bring back a mainstream sporty model like the Celica? I doubt it, because the old Celica didn't sell well at the end of its life, and it never really sold well in general terms. And Toyota, because of a wide variety of reasons, has really been focusing on core models and core profitability. And sporty models that are gasoline definitely would hurt their corporate average fuel economy compliance in America. And that's something that Toyota is very, very laser focused on right now. The closest I think we'll get is the Supra. And I think in reality, the Supra is that sporty model that we've been looking for. It's surprisingly affordable. It's less expensive than the old Supra was. So in real terms, the real cost of money, it's less expensive than the old Supra was by a wide margin. And I just think that's probably where they need to be. The Honda Civic Type R doesn't sell in great volume, neither does the GTI or the Golf R, etc. And all those products ended up costing their manufacturers money to make, and that just doesn't seem to be the business that Toyota's in right now. Let's see, Ford Expedition Platinum versus Lincoln Navigator L. I would get the Navigator. I just like the interior more than the Expedition, and the cost difference isn't huge. New Audi Q3 versus Volvo XC40 versus anything in the same class. I really like the new Q3, and I really like the XC40. I'll have to reserve judgment until we get our hands on the Q3 to drive, but the new Q3 looks excellent. I really like the way that it looks inside and outside. And the new XC40, same thing. It's a great little car. The XC40 is a really good deal. The Q3 looks like it's going to be as good of a deal or perhaps a slightly better deal. We won't know until some of those final prices and options prices come out. But at the moment, the XC40 is one of the best deals in that segment. I'm actually surprised that Volvo doesn't charge more for it. I think they could have gotten away with a higher MSRP. Moving along here, any news on the upgrade to the 2020 CR-V? We have not heard any real news about that. Probably may hear some more closer to November and the LA International Auto Show. That's going to be my guess there. Moving along here. Ibar is saying, I'm thinking Ram 2500, still debating whether to go for gasoline or diesel, even though I'll be towing that heavy loads. I love diesel. Oh, I'm guessing you're saying you won't be towing heavy loads. The diesel is a lot of fun. It's the classic 3/4 ton, 1 ton truck engine. Everybody loves the diesel clatter. Does it make a lot of sense? Not necessarily. That is always the problem with those. Which would you get? That would be tough. I guess it depends on your budget. The diesel is quite a bit more expensive than the gasoline engine. I think personally I would probably get the gasoline engine because I'm feeling a little bit cheap. But again, I do love the diesel. So tough choice. Let me know what you decide. Is the Lincoln Aviator midsize? Seems like it's a tweener vehicle. It definitely appears to be midsize. Let's look at its spec sheet here if I can pull up its overall length. Let's see, move along here. Aviator. I'm sure someone will tell me how much it looks like. I can't find the link there, but it's about the same size as the Ford Explorer. The Explorer is definitely a solid mid-size vehicle in that category. It is 198.8 inches long, so it's shorter than the Durango. It's shorter than what else do we have here? It's shorter than the Traverse, which is theoretically in that same segment. The Traverse, it depends on how you look at it. I guess I would say if you're separating this into smaller entries and bigger entries, which we can do in the mainstream segment, we have things like the Highlander and the Sorento, which are a lot shorter, but they still compete because they're still 3-row crossovers in that same price range. If we look at the X5, the X5 is only 4 inches shorter than the Aviator, still in the same target category there. The GLE 189 inches. So it's plausible, I would say. The Q7, the Q8, those longer entries are still there in that same sort of price range or same sort of size range. So yeah, I think that it's an okay justification. Tweener vehicles, that's a tricky one. So I don't know if I would necessarily call it a tweener vehicle. The general theory is that you get more bang for your buck. That's the theory here. So when we look at something along the lines of, let's pick a good one here, like an Infiniti Q50, more bang for the buck there would be that it's priced like a BMW 3 Series, but size-wise, especially on the inside, it's somewhere between a 3 and a 5. That's the classic example. A lot of Cadillacs fall into this category as well. In the midsize segment, especially the midsize 3-row crossover segment, there's so much variation between these two groups that it's hard to say. When we're looking at your other competitors here like GLE is primarily a 2-row crossover. Aviator is a 3-row. So is it a GLS? Maybe not, but it's solidly an XC90, MDX, Q7 kind of thing there. Versus the Q7 and the XC90, it has a longer hood because it's rear-wheel drive. So that's the main reason that it's going to be a little bit longer. Interior dimensions are very in keeping, I think, with that segment. Let's move on here. Are we planning a full review of the Aviator? Yes, we definitely are. It will be coming after the Explorer video. Not really sure exactly when that will be. Let's see, moving along here. Someone's asking about a new Acura RLX. Will a new one come to market? That's a good question. We don't really know. Acura does not sell very many of the RLXs, and so it's hard to tell whether they're going to spend their money there. There haven't been any rumors, so I wouldn't put any big expectations on that just yet. Let's move on here. Thoughts on the FCA Renault Alliance talks? They're just talks at the moment until we really see more. I don't think it's going to be a thing. Big thing to keep in mind is the French government's control over and their share of Renault and that alliance there. So unless the French government is willing to give up factories and jobs, I don't think that alliance is going to go anywhere. Why does Subaru never cross lips in talking about reliability, even if you're talking about secondary Japanese brands? The big reason there, Mark, is that Subaru's sales are very small. So if you look at Subaru, they just generally fall off the radar unless we're specifically talking about Subaru or vehicles that would compete directly with Subarus. You'll notice, for instance, if we're talking about the Jeep Cherokee and Jeep Cherokee reviews, we'll talk about the Subaru. And frequently when we're talking about vehicles in that segment, we aren't necessarily talking about Cherokee even. Subaru's reliability tends to be below the mainstream Japanese brands, so it's down there with Mitsubishi and Mazda, generally speaking, depending on the vehicle you're looking at. So that's the main reason there. Subaru definitely has a lot of key advantages: standard all-wheel drive, decent fuel economy, good value in the base trims. But you'll notice that Subaru's volume models don't sell in extraordinary quantities in all of their segments. Let's see here, move along here. How does one find monthly incentives that car manufacturers give to dealers to meet their quotas? That's a good question. There are a number of sites out there that you can look those sorts of things up on. They're not necessarily going to be current, and they're not going to be the numbers that are disclosed only to dealers necessarily. But all those pricing sites, like the True Car pricing sites, that sort of things, they'll give you a good idea of some of those things. Let's see here. What electric SUV should we look forward to in the next 2 to 3 years? Should I wait for the Model Y? Toyota or Honda will be launching a new eSUV. Toyota and Honda have been dabbling with EV concepts. Honda has one that will theoretically be closer to production than Toyota soon, but it's not going to be the same size as the Model Y. If you're looking for a crossover that is in that RAV4 size category that is electric, you're going to be either looking at the Model Y or you're going to be waiting a while. We have the Audi e-tron, the Jaguar I-Pace, two very expensive luxury entries. Those definitely fall down on when it comes to overall efficiency versus the Tesla products. It's probably going to be the same thing when we're talking about Model Y. And the electric SUV that I think I'm most interested in a way, is the Volvo XC40 battery electric vehicle that is theoretically promised sometime in the future. Who knows exactly when, obviously. That's not going to be a Model Y competitor. It's going to be smaller than a Model Y, considerably smaller. But it should be relatively affordable, and it'll give us a good idea of what Volvo's battery electric vehicles are going to be like in terms of efficiency and the other feature set. Tesla really does have the game cornered here when it comes to efficiency, charging speed, and performance. Those three key categories there. Let's see here. Do you believe in fully autonomous cars will be on the road in the next 5 years? I think that someone might have something, but it's not going to be what is bandied around right now as hop into the car with no driver, take me somewhere. I think that's more than 5 years away. Raj is asking, base Model 3, good lease option. I don't know what the lease deals are on the base Model 3. If you're going to buy one, it's a good buy option. Lease deals will depend an awful lot on residuals and what deals the manufacturer is willing to put on the hood. Tesla does not have a whole lot of cash right now, so they're not going to really be putting cash on the hood of any leases. So I think your lease rate on the Model 3 may not be as advantageous as some of the other luxury cars out there. Let's see here. Sandy's saying, I will be turning in my Hyundai Elantra, torn on what to step into, thinking about a 2020 Ascent hatch or something like a Kona or Honda Fit. What else would you suggest in that category? If you're looking for a small crossover rather than a small sedan, then I think you hit the nail on the head with the Kona and the HR-V. The Honda Fit I like theoretically up front, but versus the Honda HR-V, the Honda Fit is less fit. Performance is a little bit below the Honda HR-V, and the shape of the interior in the second row is a bit of a problem for me in the Fit. The ceiling really curves in a lot, so even though if you sit a little to the side, headroom is fine in the Honda Fit. If you're sitting right in the bucket-shaped bench seat in the back, then the ceiling is hitting me strangely on the side because it's kind of round in the back. And for some reason, even though the HR-V is related to the Fit, we don't see that in the HR-V. It's much more square in the back. So Kona, Fit, I think Kia Soul, if you don't need front-wheel drive, is definitely something to look at. There's a reason that the Kia Soul is the best-selling vehicle, whether you want to put it in the small hatch or the small crossover segment, wherever you want to stick it. It outsells everything else in there. It outsells Honda Fit and Honda HR-V put together. There's a bit more variation going on in the Soul lineup, and it's very practical on the inside. So those would be my suggestions there. Considering Tesla doesn't let you buy your car at the end of your lease, you're funding Tesla's cause. That's an interesting point. That's true. So Teslas, they're all very strangely worded leases where the car goes back. I have a feeling that there will be movement on that at the end of the leases, that you would be able to buy it, or of course you could just lease another Model 3 at that moment. See here, Ping is asking what class is the Tiguan in. Tiguan is in the compact category, so it is about the same size as the Rogue overall. It's definitely on the larger end of the RAV4 CR-V Rogue category, but it is still within the general envelope in that category there. Is the Hyundai Sonata EV rumored? I want one. Not that we have heard, so I haven't heard anything about that just yet. Can you remove that black round thing to the right side of your head? Black round thing. I think you were talking about the hat. I don't know. Anyway, have you heard if Honda has a real fix to the 1.5-liter turbo engine oil dilution issue? We have not heard yet, but there is the recall. So we'll have to wait until we see what that recall is going to be there. What is the Volkswagen Tiguan so detuned versus the EU version? Mainly, it's for cost. In the United States, remember that the Volkswagen Tiguan plays in kind of a different pool than it does in Europe, as with most of Volkswagen's products. So in the American market, Volkswagen is focused on bringing value-priced, value-oriented cars to our market. They've tried the whole discount Audi thing, and it didn't do anything for their sales, or their profitability. Let's see here. Why are car manufacturers more involved in EVs versus hybrids? The EV versus hybrid debate is a little bit tricky there. Let me look up exactly that comment here. Hybrids, it depends on what the manufacturer is doing and why the manufacturer is investing in alternative cars. So the big reason you want to invest in hybrids at the moment is to increase your corporate average fuel economy score. The big reason you want to invest in electric cars is for California's zero emissions compliance. So California has said that by 2025, a certain percentage of cars must be zero emissions vehicles. They could be electric, they could be hydrogen, and there are some partial credits given for natural gas, even though it's not zero emissions. Who knows? And the way you get there is not by a strict reading of that percentage. So the key thing here is when you're looking at that and you say 20% of cars in California must be zero emissions by 2025. Oh my goodness, that's not achievable. Not really 25%, because anytime you get a government involved in anything, the numbers get a little bit fuzzy. So there's a credit system in California, and a true battery electric vehicle like Tesla's, those qualify for a certain number of EV credits. And it's the credits that equal that 20% theoretically in this weird scheme. And because Tesla, for instance, sells only electric vehicles, they can sell their credits. So they sell their credits to FCA, to other manufacturers, etc. Hybrid vehicles also count for partial credits. So if you're Toyota, for instance, you're sitting pretty. You don't need to invest in electric cars as much as other manufacturers do, because you have so many hybrids that you can get to this 25 or whatever percent with your hybrid credits that they've had for a long time. And then you can roll out your EVs more slowly when they're more profitable. Other companies, like especially luxury car companies, are really investing in new EVs now because they need those credits now, and they need them to balance out their other vehicles. Car companies like Hyundai Kia Motor Group, they're investing on both sides of this front because they have the corporate average compliance to worry about, they have California ZEV to worry about, and they have a lot of directives in their own home market. So South Korea has a really big push right now towards energy independence, very similar to what we see in Japan, actually. And that push is really gearing them towards hydrogen cars and battery electric vehicles, because those are things they can produce domestically, and it will give them more energy independence. So let's see here, moving along. 2020 Soul EV, that is being delayed. So if you're looking for a review on that, that is going to be quite some time. We're told that the 2020 Soul EV may not actually happen until the calendar year 2020. There's a worldwide battery shortage, and that's the big thing right there. Let's see here. Top picks in the mainstream midsize sedan segment. Off the top of my head, it would be the usual suspects. It would be Camry. It would be Accord. Those are my top two picks. In a lot of ways, they tie with one another. After that, the Mazda 6 is terribly pretty, and it's a lot of fun. The Volkswagen Passat is roomy on the inside, and I think it's an okay buy if you can get a really good deal on it. And the Nissan Altima is efficient, and you're probably going to get a really good deal on that on the dealer lot as well. Will the BMW 1 Series hatch ever come to the US? Probably not. Let's see here. Do you have any information on the Bronco, baby Bronco? Not yet. Ford, we'll probably be hearing more about that as we get towards the summer here. Who makes the touchscreen in the Dodge Ram Tesla? No. So a lot of folks have been asking about the Dodge Ram touchscreen and why it's taken other car companies so long to make a 12-inch screen. I would be willing to bet that the touchscreen in the Ram is the same company, but not the same screen, as what we see in the new Legacy and the new Outback. A lot of folks don't realize this, but components in cars go through a huge amount of vetting and research and development because the temperatures experienced in cars, especially in hot summer sun, it far exceeds typical tests in military or in industrial testing procedures. And this is a problem that I think has been really highlighted by the emergence of issues in the Model S and Model X from Tesla. So there's been a lot of talk around this lately because Tesla is no longer fixing people's screens that have had some high temperature issues in the S and the X, the original vehicles with the large vertical touchscreen. That screen was not a car spec screen. So the rumor mill around is that when Tesla wanted this big screen in the S and the X and no automotive supplier would do it, they turned to an industrial supplier and bought a screen that didn't have the durability ratings that we see in other car screens out there. And that's the reason that we're seeing delamination, dead pixels, color rendition issues, delamination and disconnection of some of the connector elements in the screen, so some of the parts of the screen are going wrong. And Tesla had been covering them under some sort of, undisclosed off-the-shelf warranty thing. They were customer goodwill. They were just replacing these screens with refurbished units, but apparently that stopped. So, if you're living in a hot climate, you may experience those issues with those screens. Now, we don't know whether those issues apply to the Model 3 or not, because the Model 3's screen is much newer, and it's possible that an automotive vendor could have made an automotive grade screen for the Model 3, but we probably won't really know for maybe about 4 or 5 years, the point in time where folks in Phoenix that have been parking their black Model 3s out in the sun for a few years, when they start getting their reliability metrics in, we'll know pretty much. Let's see here, moving on. Asking about available compact hybrids from Mitsubishi and Subaru. Not really. I wouldn't really consider those Ram competitors. Subaru's only hybrid system is the Crosstrek hybrid in America at the moment, and that is a Toyota hybrid system. The Mitsubishi hybrid system is quite different in the Outlander plug-in hybrid. It's a serial hybrid. It's a little bit closer to some early concepts from Honda, I guess would be the really the best way to put that. But there's really no production corollary to the Mitsubishi system at the moment. Let's see here. Tian is saying, which 7-seat SUV is reliable, dependable, and comfortable on the third row seat? If you're looking for reliable and dependable and roomy third row seat, you're looking basically at the Kia Telluride that's brand new, the Hyundai Palisade. Based on their track record for reliability, they're probably going to be above average, and their third row seats are the most accommodating in that segment. Aside from that, you would have to step down into the smaller category for the reliability factor there in a part of your question. So Highlander, Pilot, etc. They're going to be the more reliable options, but their third rows are not going to be as accommodating as the larger vehicles. What are our thoughts on the next Mercedes-Benz S-Class? I can't wait to see it in person, so that's my thought there. When we did a review on the 2019 Tundra, why didn't I compare it to the Titan second generation? Primarily for brevity in the length of the video. That was the main reason. Titan's also not a big seller in the market any more than Tundra is. So the cross-shop data that we had was that Tundra, like Titan, primary cross-shops are the big three pickup trucks out there. So that's the main reason there. Is the upcoming Q3 as large as the Volkswagen Tiguan? No, it is definitely a lot smaller than the Tiguan. Let's see here. When do you expect to have a full RAV4 hybrid available? Full RAV4 hybrid review is probably going to be 4 to 5 weeks out, do you think, Alex?
The one we just did this week?
Yeah, the one we just recorded this week.
Maybe like a week.
Maybe a week?
Maybe like a week and a half, 2 weeks.
2 weeks, depending on who you ask. If you ask me, to 5 weeks. If you ask my editor, 2 weeks. I don't know, somewhere in that range. Before the end of the summer, most likely. And then I would say if our RAV4 hybrid that we ordered for our long-term review somehow shows up soon, then probably sooner. Let's see here. When will the CX-9 be refreshed? It's probably 2 to 3 years away would be my guess at this moment. Honda Type RR US spec coming. Don't really know at the moment. Dodge Avenger is a good used value. I would say it's probably a good used value because you're probably going to get it really cheap. So the Avenger was not necessarily a bad car in its last generation. I never thought it was terribly attractive. But the V6 engine, 6-speed automatic was a good combo, and it's probably going to be significantly less expensive than all of the competition. So I would generally say yes, especially if it's not too abused, if it was lightly loved. Thoughts on Cadillac as a brand? I like the new CT4 and CT5 that you mentioned. I like Cadillac's sedan lineup in general, but their crossover lineup I think has been a soft spot for Cadillac. So a little bit of a mixed bag there if I'm honest. The new Lincoln crossovers I think tend to be a little bit more appealing, to me at least, than what we see from Cadillac. I like the XT5. I like the XT4 as a vehicle in a vacuum. But when you start comparing it to the competition, they end up being pretty expensive. You will get better deals on the Cadillac lot than on the BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Volvo, Range Rover lot, etc. But that MSRP is enough for a lot of shoppers, I think, to look elsewhere right away. The last XT4 that we tested here at Alex and Autos was more expensive than a Range Rover Evoque. It was $10,000 more expensive than a lot of other mainstream luxury competitors there. And I think that's a problem for Cadillac. If they get their pricing more in line with their crossovers, it's not going to be so much of a problem. A good example, I think, of that is the new Aviator versus the new XT6. Both of their pricing has been announced, and the XT6 is more expensive, and it gets about 100 horsepower less, and it's front-wheel drive versus the rear-wheel drive Aviator. So I think that's a problem already for it. Some of this will depend, I think, on practicality. Hopefully we'll be driving the XT6 soon. If the XT6 makes a good argument for itself in practicality, then it might be a good option there. But I think that its very nature makes that Cadillac be compared to MDX and then XC90 next, which is a different kind of comparison than Aviator being rear-wheel drive will cause it to be compared to X5 GLE first and then MDX secondarily. So I think that's kind of the problem there. Let's see here. Any idea who makes Chris is asking again, who makes the screen in the Dodge Ram? It's probably a Vallejo or one of the other automotive industrial companies out there. Specifically, I don't know, but it's going to be the same company that makes all of these other screens for FCA is a solid bet there. In case you're asking, it is definitely not Tesla. Let's put it that way. Tesla does not even make their own screen, so it's definitely not Tesla making the screen. Is the handling on a Q50 comparable to a 3 Series? In general terms, yes. The Q50 is a little bit bigger, and it definitely feels a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier, but generally the dynamics are very comparable to the 3 Series overall. And Q50 Red Sport, I think, is a good corollary to the BMW 340i. There is no corollary to the BMW M3 in the Infiniti lineup, but the Red Sport is definitely fun. The Red Sport reminds me an awful lot of an American muscle car, to be honest. Let's see here. Gen 2 volt, and you're worried about repair and reliability. Reliability has been very good on the Volt, generally speaking. The battery system has been incredibly reliable as far as long-term durability on the batteries. GM has been very, very conservative on cooling and all the other design constraints around that. And the hybrid system itself, its design is very similar to what we see in the Toyota Prius. It's a very reliable, intrinsically reliable design, so I wouldn't have any big concerns on that long-term. Let's see here. Autopilot specifically, Dan, we do have a video on the Tesla Model 3's autopilot system. If you want more specifics on that, I guess let us know. You can probably send an email to itsaconspiracy@alexonautos.com and let us know exactly what you're thinking of there. I probably will do a little bit of video on the autopilot system before our Model 3 ends up being sold. Let's see here. Current trend of car preference in America. Do we care about fuel economy? Fuel economy is not sexy in America any more than safety is. So in America, we definitely see fuel economy and safety being pushed by more on government tests and government compliance necessarily than consumer preference. Safety, that's changing a little bit with active safety technologies, but when it comes to crash safety definitely seems to be Insurance Institute for Highway Safety and National Highway Transit Authority, NHTSA, however that spells out. It's being driven by those organizations rather than consumer preference necessarily. So when we take a look at the average fuel economy vehicles in America, the only time it improves is when the government says it must improve. Let's see here. Any two-row SUVs with sliding second-row seats? Blake, yes. The Nissan Rogue that we have this week has sliding second-row seats, and the Honda Passport has sliding second-row seats. I think there are a few of those mid-sized two-row crossovers that also have second-row sliding seats, and the Volkswagen Tiguan probably has them as well. Generally speaking, vehicles that were either designed for an optional third row or vehicles that were based on a three-row vehicle that use a lot of their components will have those sliding second-row seats. That explains the Honda Passport. Let's see. I haven't had a single video of someone sitting in third row 2020 Explorer. It is definitely smaller versus Telluride and Palisade. Absolutely no question about it. Remember that the Explorer has not really grown, so it is still sort of middle of the pack in terms of overall dimensions. So keep in mind that its interior dimensions are going to be middle of the pack as well. Let's see. Opinions on the new CT4V and CT5V. I think the power figures are a little bit disappointing, but they're offset by Cadillac saying that there will be other V models soon. So I think what they're doing with the V lineup now is instead of trying to do V Sport and then a full-on V, they're calling all of them V. Not sure about the logic there exactly, or if the full-on performance version is going to get a different letter or number or whatever. But it does appear that there are going to be higher horsepower versions coming soon. So looking at the CTS4V and CT4V and CT5V as if they were V Sport models, that makes a lot of sense. So CT4V competing with 340i, that's plausible. CT5V competing with some version of the 5 Series, maybe the V8 version of the 5 Series, that's logical. Let's see, top 5 three-row SUVs or crossovers. At the moment, I would say for absolute value, especially in the base trim, that would be the Subaru Ascent. That is a really good value. The Honda Pilot is a good all-around option. The new 2020 Highlander is probably going to be an excellent vehicle, excellent choice, especially if you want a hybrid model, because that hybrid system is going to be all new. Without a doubt, the Kia Telluride and Hyundai Palisade, they're enormous on the inside. They're not huge on the outside, so it is deceptive, but on the inside, they're by far the roomiest crossover in that segment, considerably more room than any of the other alternatives. And I think that number 5 is probably going to have to be the Explorer, although I haven't driven it yet, because it's going to be the only other rear-wheel drive entry here other than the Dodge Durango. So that's really going to give it a very interesting driving dynamic, very unlike any of the other crossovers. And then if you're interested in towing, the Dodge Durango is the only thing out there that has an integrated trailer brake controller available. It's the only thing that will really tow more than about 5,000 to 6,000 pounds. So if you want to be in that 7,000 pound towing category or 8,000 pounds, that's going to be the Dodge Durango. Thoughts on ventilated seats? I love them. I would always buy a car with ventilated seats. Let's see here. Is the 2016 ELR pre-owned for $30,000 a good value? $30,000. I don't know about that for an ELR. I found the ELR a little expensive, to be honest, but it was really the only thing in that segment, so there we go. Will the next Honda Passport have the 2.0T? I don't know. Honda has been dabbling with the turbos, but they really seem to love their V6 with cylinder deactivation. So I would say it depends on which engine gives them the mix of towing and fuel economy that they're after. So we don't know what the 2-liter turbo would tow like yet because they haven't stuck it in any vehicle that really has a good towing rating. And supposedly the Passport and Pilot and Ridgeline are rough and tumble towing focused, according to Honda. So that's probably why they have a V6. Next gen Land Cruiser, probably the 12th of never. Toyota is definitely stretching us out on that one. Thoughts on BMW 1 Series hatch? It's a cute little BMW hatch, so if you're looking for a front-wheel drive luxury hatch, it's going to be great. Don't expect to see it here too soon. A lot of questions circling around that. Quattro or 4Motion, which is better? That's an interesting question. I've talked about this a lot. Better is a relative term. Now, if we're talking about traditional Quattro, A4, A6, A7, A8, Q5, Q7, Q8 versus 4Motion, I would take 4Motion for the driving dynamics. Driving dynamics in that comparison, Quattro to 4Motion, generally going to be better in the Mercedes. The main reason for that is weight balance. The Quattro system, by its very design, it uses a transaxle. Now, it's a longitudinal transaxle, not a transverse transaxle. All that really means is the front axle and the transmission are all in the same thing, so all in the same case. The Mercedes does not do that, and as a result, the Mercedes can have the engine behind the front axle or on top of the front axle. And in the Audi, the engine is always going to be over the front. It's always going to be in front of the front axle. There's no way around that in that design. And as a result, even though Audi has done a lot to try and work on that weight balance issue, it's still going to be better balanced in the Mercedes. And generally speaking, that's going to give you better neutral handling tendencies. Subaru Ascent, Highlander, or Telluride, I would say it depends on what you're looking for, because these are three slightly different vehicles. So Ascent, very quickly here, because we're starting to run out of time, Ascent does very well as far as base trims. So if you're looking at a base model, good value in the base model, good fuel economy, all-wheel drive standard. As you work your way on up the trim ladder, I think the Ascent starts to fall apart a little bit, because the interior trappings, the features, functions, etc. that you get in the Ascent tend to be a little bit less nice than the competition. And that's just because they're giving us that all-wheel drive standard. There has to be a little bit of give and take here. But as a base or mid-range, that's exactly where the Subaru plays well. Excellent fuel economy, as I said before. 2020 Highlander, I think it's going to be a good all-around vehicle, just as we come to expect from Toyota. It's probably also going to be comfortable if the new RAV4 has anything to show for that. And the hybrid system is probably going to be the most efficient in that segment. Telluride does really well if you're a family that needs a lot of room on the inside, but if you're a family that doesn't have child seats. And that's the same problem we see in the Subaru Ascent. Subaru Ascent, the seats will not allow you to keep a child seat latched into place and tilt and slide the seat forward. You can just slide it forward, and then you have to try and squeeze through that small opening to get into the third row. Same thing in the Telluride. Both have that same problem. Likely, we'll see the same thing in the Highlander, because Toyota does not have a seat mechanism that moves in that way. If you want child practicality, then you have to look outside these three options. Let's see here. Are HID headlamps that much better than halogen projectors? Ooh, pardon me. And are they worth it? LEDs, generally speaking, the main advantage to an LED is going to be consistency of light output over time. So it's not just that it's going to be brighter up front, because it would theoretically be possible to create a halogen system that would be just as bright as an LED. And with color correcting halogens, just as blue as an LED, if that's something that you're after. But the main benefit to the LED is going to be that it's easy to focus, it's compact, it uses less power, and it's going to last probably the lifetime of the vehicle. LED headlights can fail, but generally speaking, they will outlast the engine in the car. So that's the main benefit to them there. HIDs, they were the new thing in an era where people wanted brighter light more easily without having to worry about the cooling and other systems involved. So bright light out of the module, but the lifetime is not as good as LEDs. So that's why we see most luxury cars moving away from HIDs and moving into LEDs. Let's see here. How does it make business case for Hyundai and Kia to have such identical vehicles? Isn't it double the overhead for the same vehicle? Well, the same argument could be made for any manufacturer that has multiple different brands. Remember that Hyundai didn't create Kia. Kia was a separate company that then was merged into this ginormous conglomerate that is the crazy thing that's Hyundai Kia Motor. And it's a very strange business arrangement, let's put it that way. Hyundai does not own all of Kia. It is a very, very weird thing. But Hyundai effectively controls Kia, and they operate as one sort of continuous planning thing. The logic behind it now, and over the last 10 years or so, is that they're going after different customer sets. So Hyundai is going after mainstream customers and customers that are looking for more luxurious vehicles in a way, and Kia's going the sporty route. So that's why we see the Kia Stinger, for instance, and we don't see a corollary in the Hyundai brand. We see a corollary in Genesis. So the Stinger's there. The Soul is supposed to be the hipper, funky, sporty vehicle in a way. and the Veloster is its relative. So we don't see as many directly identical vehicles as we see in other brands. We see variations on the theme. So the Palisade is definitely nicer on the inside than the Telluride. And the Telluride is supposed to be that sportier, more rugged thing, and the Palisade is the more luxury-oriented thing. So it gives these two shoppers something different to experience. But then the sharing helps reduce costs overall. They also allow the manufacturers to go in different directions. Like Hyundai Ioniq, its corollary is the Kia Niro. So the Kia Niro is hatchbacky. The Ioniq is Prius-y. The Veloster is a subcompact hatchback. The Kia Soul is a subcompact box. So these are the tie-ins in their relationship. Kona is on its own. Kona is related theoretically to Soul, sort of. There will be a new Kia SUV that is not directly related in the Hyundai group exactly, because the Stonic is the Kia corollary and it doesn't exist here. Anyway, I've probably spent too much time on that. Very odd arrangement of vehicles. The business case does seem to make sense in the Rationale world, because it is less than Chevy and Buick and Cadillac, less than that tie-up in many ways, but at the same time more than the Nissan Renault tie-up, if that makes sense. Will Honda sell an Insight plug-in hybrid? It doesn't appear at this time that we'll see an Insight PHEV, but we never know. Definitely not anytime soon. Review on the Hyundai Palisade, Gary, that is coming up soon. That'll happen in about 3 weeks. It'll be middle of June. Let's see here. Does Pacifica Hybrid actually operate electric only? I read that the engine always turns on. So, Allie, yes, the Pacifica Hybrid is a true plug-in hybrid vehicle, just like most of the plug-in hybrids in America. It will operate electric only up to about 80 miles an hour or so, as long as you treat it gently. If on the power gauge you never exceed, I think it's about 3/4 throttle, 2/3 throttle, somewhere around there, then the gasoline engine will not turn on. It can heat the cabin, it can cool the cabin, electric only. But if you want maximum power, maximum acceleration, then it will turn on the gasoline engine. So if you're merging onto the highway and you're doing it at a leisurely to moderate pace, then the engine will not turn on. If you need to floor it, the engine's going to turn on. That makes a lot of sense because it has the engine, so it might as well use it for those higher performance situations. And meanwhile, tune the electric operation to be more efficient at most operating ranges. Now, for me, I live up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass from my office, so I have to climb that mountain pass and then drive on higher speed freeways on my way to work. And on my daily commute, the Pacifica has no problem staying electric only to climb up the mountain pass, go down the mountain pass, and then go 75 miles an hour on the highway. It turns on its gasoline engine right around my office because the battery runs out. Let's see here. Blah, 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 blah. Some, I believe, already have answered that question. Maybe they're a little earlier. An idea of when the Ram gets the diesel engine should be coming later this year. Main reason for that is that it has finally been approved, so there are a lot of additional paperwork and hoops to jump through till it can firmly be sold, but it has theoretically passed most of those. Wrangler with 2.0T or 3.6 for long-term ownership cost. I would go 3.6. 2.0T is a new engine. We don't know how reliable it will be. It's probably going to be a fairly good volume as far as FCA engines go, and we'll see it in more vehicles, but at the moment, long-term reliability is an unknown. It's related to the Alfa engine, but there's a lot that's been changed, so we can't really apply Alfa Romeo reliability to that engine. Let's see here. Why do you think Toyota doesn't fully update the Tacoma? Mainly because it doesn't sell that well, and that's why we see the Toyota tends to update their volume models more frequently because they're better sellers. Let's see here. If robo-taxis aren't a reality in 3 years, don't count on Tesla keeping these cars. I would agree with that. I think that Tesla's probably going to be changing that at some point or allowing people to really keep their cars if they want. Let's see. If you're in the market for Tesla, should you be concerned about the business side of things? To some extent, yes. It would depend on, I guess, the kind of shopper you are for Tesla. The reality with Tesla is going to be that even if Tesla goes bankrupt tomorrow, someone's going to buy them. The question is, will Tesla stay a going concern independent of another car company, or will they be purchased by another car company? I think in either of these scenarios, you don't have to worry about future servicing of your vehicle. If Tesla stays independent, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. If Tesla gets purchased by someone in the fire sale after they go bankrupt, then they'll just roll them into whatever dealer network they have. So I don't think that's a particular problem. And it really wouldn't matter who bought them. I mean, FCA's got cash right now, it seems, and the ability to raise cash. Ford, less so. General Motors definitely seems to be on good financial footing for that kind of acquisition. In a fire sale, mind you. They can't afford them without Tesla going bankrupt first. And then, of course, there are the Chinese manufacturers like Geely, et cetera, that would definitely be interested in buying car companies. Any way you slice it, I think it would end up being just fine in that respect. So on the business side, although as someone that follows the business side in the car world, that affects my perception sometimes of car companies, I would not be necessarily worried about that if I were buying or leasing the car. Let's see here. What do you think of fuel cell vehicles versus battery hybrids? That's an interesting question. Fuel cells definitely have some advantages over hybrids in long run situations or in larger vehicle setups. So, and the reason for that is the amount of energy you can keep in the vehicle for the weight of the battery. So if we're looking at a pickup truck, in some ways, hydrogen makes more sense for a pickup truck than battery electric. Remember that when we're talking about electric vehicles, we're talking about both hydrogen vehicles and battery electric vehicles, because a hydrogen fuel cell car is just an electric car with a different kind of battery in it. Now, hydrogen fuel cells are not as efficient. So when we're taking a look at the amount of electricity that would be required to make the hydrogen and the electricity you get back out of the hydrogen fuel cells are not efficient when compared to battery electric vehicles. But their big advantage is rapidness of refueling and the amount of energy you can store on board. So the Hyundai Nexo, for instance, weighs about 4,000 pounds. It's about the same curb weight as a Hyundai Santa Fe 2.0T. Has about the same range as well, 380 miles if you get the base version of the Hyundai Nexo. That is considerably longer than any battery electric vehicle out there. And when you take a look at the real world range in the fuel cell vehicles, 380 miles, 400 miles is definitely very, very achievable in those vehicles. There's simply a ton of energy on board, and it's lightweight, relatively speaking. If you were to take a look, for instance, at the Rivian pickup truck right there, its battery is absolutely massive and very, 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 very heavy. And that's what's required to get a battery electric vehicle that kind of size, or the size really of the Nexo and the general efficiency shape of the Nexo, that kind of range. So I think that hydrogen does have a future when we're talking about vehicles that were designed for long distance travel, someone that does not live in a home or a condo where they can install a battery electric charging station. There's a lot of rational reason to buy a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle as well. But then, of course, we have the realities that there aren't very many places to fill your fuel cell at the moment. They're doubling the number of stations in California, but it's still not going to be a lot. Let's put it that way. Any ideas on a new Kia Optima hybrid? The Optima hybrid is probably going to be after the Sonata. So the Sonata just got its new debut. Probably 2 years later, we'll see the new Kia Optima. At that time, we'll probably see a new Optima hybrid system. Let's see here. How much longer is travel provision going to be applying to fuel cell vehicles, CARB ZEV credits? I'm not sure what you mean by the travel provision. I think do you mean the credit system and everything involved with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles? I don't think that that's going to be a problem going long term. In fact, I would say that most likely the benefits that California specifically gives to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are likely going to last longer on fuel cell vehicles than battery electric vehicles as far as calendar years go. The main reason for that would be that there are fewer of them. And so as battery electric vehicles become more popular, the credits and the discounts, et cetera, and the tax credits and whatnot, they're going to start leveling off because it's going to be unaffordable on battery electric vehicles. Hydrogen is probably still going to have them longer, would be my guess there. Let's see here. Q3 EPA on their build website lists 1922 combined with 27 with regular gas. Please comment. Sounds about right. Remember that an all-wheel drive mini crossover like that with a turbocharged engine, it's not really going to be particularly great in terms of overall fuel economy. It's going to be somewhat similar to a lot of the other options. Let's see. Naveen's asking best active safety package. Best active safety package in the mainstream probably would be Nissan right now in the Pro Pilot Assist system. It's a lot smoother than the Honda and the Toyota systems. The Honda system especially is not terribly smooth in the way that it drives. And then outside that, I think most of the other manufacturers are lumped together. There's really very little difference in terms of the smoothness and operability of the Hyundai, Kia, Ford, FCA, GM systems, etc. Thoughts on the Kia Stinger? I like the Stinger. I love the way that it drives. It kind of reminds me of an American muscle car. It's got a slightly soft suspension in the rear, so it has kind of this interesting dynamic when you're really pushing it hard out on a favorite winding mountain road. It drives a little bit more like a big FCA sedan in a way, but it's definitely quick and it's a good deal. Let's see here. Why is Chevy Volt dying? Primarily because sales tanked. After the tax credit died, there was seemingly little reason to buy the Volt. I think that is something that we saw in this generation of the Volt as well. It was definitely outgunned by some of the other plug-in hybrids that are available in America, and I think it was just its time. Will we see the Volt system in other vehicles? We really don't know. It depends on whether or not GM is going to push more towards battery electric vehicles or whether they're going to try and still deliver some of those plug-in hybrids. Let's see here. Good compact stands, reliability, safety, good lease deals, Forte, Corolla, or Mazda 3. Personally, I would say Mazda 3, Forte, or I would add Civic to that list because the Civic is, I think, still my favorite in that segment. New Mazda 3 is really good, but I think the Civic is just a good all-around vehicle that you should definitely have on your list. Let's see here. What website can I check for monthly lease deals on brand's choice, blah, blah, blah. Generally speaking, the manufacturer's own websites are going to be the best one for looking at their current lease deals. I'm not aware of any that do just general lease deal comparisons that way. How does Hellcat compare with the M5? Is it the value entry? Ooh, very, very different. Just a different kind of car generally. M5 is buttoned down. It's very direct. It's refined, etc. And the Hellcat just isn't any of those things. Still tons of fun, just not the same kind of beast. When we see the full Telluride review, hopefully soon. We don't know when exactly we'll have it in-house for a complete review. Probably going to be a few weeks out still, unfortunately. Timothy is saying Kia Stinger X out of 10. I would say 10 out of 10. I really want a Stinger somehow. I don't know why. I don't know what I would do with a Stinger is my problem. I don't need another car around. It doesn't really fit my lifestyle. It doesn't fit my business needs here at the office where we have a car that is owned by the business and is operated by a number of employees. So that's why we don't have a Stinger. I really, really wanted one when it first came out, and I kept telling myself ways that I could get myself to justify a Stinger, and none of them are reality, so I don't have a Stinger. I think that's why the Stinger doesn't sell generally that well. I mean, it sells well compared to other vehicles that it's like, but in general terms, RAV4 is so much more practical, etc., not as much fun. A crossover is more practical. You know, I got the Durango instead of the Stinger because the Stinger doesn't tow 7,000 pounds. A lot of reasons not to get the Stinger, really, but I still think it deserves a 10 out of 10 score because it's just a great buy and it's a ton of fun. Let's see here. Will Hyundai Kia phase out the 2.4? There are rumors that the 2.4 is going to be replaced by 2.5, so stay tuned with that. We will see soon. Jeep Renegade Trailhawk with the 1.3. We definitely have that on our list, but for some reason, no idea when it will ever show up. Let's see here. What types of cars are manufacturers ignoring that exist elsewhere that actually make sense to sell here? None. I would say none. If it made sense to sell in America, you can be sure that manufacturers, generally speaking, would sell here. I think the only exception to that seems to be little trucks. But little trucks don't really make sense in America because manufacturers couldn't sell them without having them get extraordinarily high fuel economy numbers. The way corporate average fuel economy compliance works in America, it disincentivizes small trucks. So I think truly small trucks, like the cute little ones that we always see at auto shows, something the size of an original T100, those would be adorable in America, but you're probably not going to see them until legislation changes. Let's see here. Best cheap European handling dynamics. Best cheap European handling dynamics. Interesting question. If by European you're talking about rear-wheel drive, then your best bet would probably be something like a Hyundai Genesis, a Genesis G70. I would say the Stinger has more American driving dynamics than European. And then after that, your least expensive options are going to be base BMW 3 Series. Tesla Model 3 would definitely be in there. That's probably going to be... Tesla Model 3 is probably the cheapest, $35,000 if you can get the base model. That's probably the cheapest. We'll go with that one. Speaking about Hyundai and Kia, the research only one name, blah, blah, blah. That is correct. So they have a conjoined research and development firm. That's the best way to think of the way the Hyundai and Kia R&D vehicles. The Namyang Research Center is the genesis of all of the products for all three brands, Genesis, Kia, Hyundai. They develop platforms, they develop the engines, transmissions, etc. And then they toss all the parts in a big bin, and Hyundai and Kia can pull out of the bin to create their products, which is why all Hyundais and Kias and Genesises are related to one another, but they're not exactly the same thing. And then after the co-development is done on some of these key components and platforms, each manufacturer is entirely on their own, and really only one or two people in the entire organization get to see both sides, and their function and reason for doing that is to make sure that they don't look too much alike, to make sure that they're separate. So that's how that all works. I know you are more about GTs than manual equipped sports cars, but do you think Acura might have more success taking the NSX Type R or the 911 route? Lightweight, manual, no electric motors. I don't know about that necessarily, but I do know that whatever the NSX is, I mean, whatever Acura does with the NSX in the future, I think that their best route to sales success would be making it less expensive. So manual, no, but lightweight, no electric motors, I think that would be fine. So if Acura could make an NSX that was $50,000, the NSX would be a huge hit. Especially if they could make the NSX handle somewhat like the existing model, and be that price point. That's, I think, the sweet spot for Acura. The reality is that Acura is not Acura is not a brand that commands Porsche pricing. Acura is not a brand that commands Mercedes pricing or BMW pricing. And I think that's the ultimate problem with the NSX, is that it is this fantastically fun, fantastically expensive thing nestled into a brand that doesn't have that kind of customer base. The original NSX was the value, reliable performance supercar, and we just don't see that in the NSX. It's not cheap enough to be attainable, and although it is unquestionably fun, why would you buy it instead of a 911? So if you can afford a $100,000 car, what's the rationale for buying the NSX over the Porsche or the whatever, or the tons of other $100,000 performance cars that are out there? My favorite of which probably at the moment would be the Mercedes-Benz GT, the AMG GT. What's the rationale for buying the NSX? I don't know. But if you could have an NSX for Corvette prices, then there are a lot of reasons to buy the NSX. Because it's going to be the reliable one. It's still going to be the fun one. It's going to be the wacky styled one, which is one of the things I love about the NSX, the crazy styling. So I really wish that Acura would think more outside the box with that vehicle and deliver us a less expensive something. I think that would be what I would want to see out of Acura. Dan's asking, what's our cat's name? Our cat's name is Beatrix. When will we see the 2021 TLX? Probably my guess would be we might start seeing things drip out around November. If we don't see the TLX in LA in 2020, we might wait until 2021. Hopefully we'll see it before then. Eclipse Cross, an IK discount. As long as you take a lot of cash off the Eclipse Cross, I think it's just fine. Russell's asking, does the Model X have ventilated seats in every row? No, the Model X does not have ventilated seats at all, is my understanding. I'm sure someone will correct that here, but no Tesla at the moment has ventilated seats that I know of. Let's see here. Travel provision. Oh, the double counting of generates points in other states. So, correct. So the travel right now, the ZEV credit thing in California applies to sales in California, but there's going to be a change in the provision where you'll have to sell the ZEV compliant vehicles in other states as well as California. I don't think that's going to have a big impact on hydrogen cars, but it's going to have a huge impact on battery electric vehicle sales and their availability across the country, especially if other states join on to California's ZEV mandate. And the most likely of those is possibly Colorado. There's been some talk about that. No legislation in progress, but there's been a lot of talk about whether or not they'll hop on the bandwagon. But that would definitely have an impact on battery electric availability. Remember that battery electric sales in America are more than just California's zero emissions mandate. Zero emissions sales also have a big impact on CAFE scores nationally. So that's the reason that Hyundai and Kia are selling their battery electric vehicles outside of the ZEV window as well. So for instance, the Niro is available in Georgia and Texas, is my understanding. And I'm sorry, not Texas, or Georgia, and it's Georgia and one of the other states. At any rate, they're available in those states because they need the volume, and the volumes of sales nationally will help their zero emissions compliance in California to some extent, but primarily their corporate average fuel compliance nationally. Let's see here. Compact truck gets 30 miles per gallon. I don't see why that would be a bad thing. The main reason is that modern DIY projects, the main reason we don't see that is that if you were to have a truly compact pickup truck in America, it would have to get more than 40 miles per gallon in order to qualify under the corporate average fuel economy standard for 2025. I believe 45 would be the target for a T100 size truck. But the moment that you make that truck as big as a Ram 1500, all of a sudden your compliance score goes down to 25 miles per gallon. So the current generation Ram 1500 V6, for instance, select models of the Silverado and the Ford F-150 are almost in compliance according to the way that CAFE is calculated in those specific models for 2025. But if you were to create a teeny tiny truck, it would have to get a hybrid system, most likely standard, in order to give it that fuel economy requirement. And doing so would really raise the overall price tag. So you'd have the effect of your bitty baby truck being more expensive than a base Ram 1500. And that's already a tough pill to swallow in the mid-sized truck category. So a Gladiator, a Ranger, a Tacoma, a Frontier, etc. The Frontier is the only one, because of its age, that is cheap. All the others, you could get into a Silverado, a F-150, a Sierra, or a Ram 1500 for less at the dealer reliably than the base models of those other trucks. Simply more volume in the big trucks is part of the reason. And as a result, that price differential ends up hurting the baby trucks. It's just not possible to make the small truck that much less expensive. There's not that much less that goes into it. That's a problem. Let's see here. Andrew Lloyd, what are our thoughts on rear cross traffic safety systems? I like them. I think any active safety system is a great thing. My preference would be the ones that include rear automatic emergency braking. That's not something we see in all of the models out there. And I'm probably going to get this wrong because I haven't researched this particular topic in a while, but I know that Nissan does it, FCA does it, some of the other American brands do rear cross-traffic auto emergency braking. I believe that Lexus might do it in the LS, but I could be wrong there. I'm sure someone will correct me. But either way, I would look for that. Rear automatic emergency braking would be my want in that system, or at the very least, systems that are very, very obvious about the rear cross-traffic. Let's see here. Let's see here. Saw your Ranger versus Gladiator review. Did you have a cold or an allergy attack? I was getting over what my doctor called almost pneumonia. So at the New York Auto Show, I caught something and it got really bad. I ended up at an event in Seattle, and that's when I realized that I had, at the very least, very bad bronchitis. So I flew home early. That was what I was filming at that event, was that bunch of those cars up there. Flew home early, ended up on lots of antibiotics for a while, and now it is almost over. But definitely on the mend. So that's why there are so many vehicles that I sound like I'm at death's door. That 6-week period, we filmed a ton of cars. So there are probably 25 videos or so that are a little affected by that. So sorry about that. Let's see here. When do you think we'll see more hybrids from Honda? Honda has dedicated themselves theoretically to more hybrids, but not until those new hybrids, those vehicles are due for a redesign. So once the vehicle comes up for redesign, we'll see the hybrid likely. Until then, probably not. Honda seems to be on a we'll do it when we need it schedule, and they don't need the hybrids really for compliance yet. So same thing that we see with Toyota and electric vehicles. You'll see Toyota make electric vehicles when they're ready to do it and when they actually need to. So until electric vehicles fit within Toyota's engineering envelope and their legislative requirement window, then we'll see them. Until then, we'll see a few things here and there from Toyota as exploratory vehicles, the RAV4 EVs that they've had in the past, the Mirai, etc. They're dabbling in these things, but they've not really made a dedicated, asserted effort to this. And I don't think we will until they really have to. Let's see here. We'll pick one last question here. Let's see here. Opinion on the best affordable under $40,000 commuter vehicle, total comfort package, etc. That's a good question. My immediate go-to pick in that under $40,000 category might surprise some of you, but it would be the Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid. The Clarity does not give us the best fuel economy. Something like the Ioniq plug-in hybrid or the Ioniq hybrid would give us better fuel economy. But I think for a commuter vehicle, especially if you're doing a long-distance commute, and perhaps I should specify this split here. So if you're looking at a long-distance commute, I used to commute, for instance, 120 miles round trip a day. And in that instance, thinking on that commute, I would want a Clarity. It's incredibly comfortable. It's quiet on the inside, relatively powerful, 200 horsepower, over 40 miles per gallon, almost 50 miles of EV range, which would definitely reduce your fuel consumption, your frequency of gas stops, and your the cost of operation as well. It also is going to be Honda reliable, which is definitely a big thing in a commuter car, especially if you're going to put a lot of miles on it. And if you were looking specifically for an EV, then I would argue that the Model 3 is probably going to be a fine choice. The seats are quite comfortable for long distance travel, as long as you can get the cheap one. I wouldn't commute in an expensive Model 3. That doesn't seem to really make a lot of sense at the moment. And then if you're looking at a less expensive, smaller option, then something like the Hyundai Ioniq, either in the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid version, would be an excellent alternative on the smaller end of things. Even better fuel economy, shorter EV range if you get the plug-in hybrid model, but very comfortable overall, decent handling dynamics, and you could definitely improve the overall handling ability aftermarket without affecting your overall fuel economy too much. Let's think here. On the EVs, on the maybe near luxury side, if you're looking for something that's a little bit pricier but still relatively affordable, then I would say any of the mainstream luxury brands, small crossovers would be a good option too. So something like the new upcoming Audi Q3, the BMW X1, XC40, etc. So with that out of the way, let's just thank everybody for watching. And again, if you want to support this channel, you can head over to patreon.com. You can click the join button down there to become a member. You can also send us those live chats, the super chat payments there if you want to. You can also find merch. We did some new t-shirt and hoodie designs, etc. You'll find those over at Teespring. Probably a link down there below the video. You'll be able to find those pretty easily. At alexnautos.com, there's also a merch link if anybody wants to go over to there. And as always, find us over at facebook.com/alexnautos so you can see what we're driving this week and, of course, what we're picking up as our new car on Saturday. So with that out of the way, I will see you all next week.